We're here in the nursery block at the research station at Pecans, and these trees have been planted in place about 25 years. We keep cutting them back so we'll have things to practice grafting on. So they do kind of look like Frankenstein trees, but it's just kind of an area to practice with. So you can see we cut them back and they send up new shoots, and so that's what we're going to be practicing on today. Now we're going to be grafting pecans by using a 4-flap method. And the 4-flap graft is used on rootstocks that are, we want a piece of graft wood that is slightly larger than our rootstock. And if we have larger trees, bigger diameter, we'd probably use something like a bark graft. But today we're going to demonstrate the 4-flap graft, and I'm going to show you the American method of how we finish it. It's a little bit different than you may have seen in the past, and some people's jaw will probably drop when they see how I finish it, but we'll see how that goes when we get ready to finish it. Now, I have a lot of people ask, when do we graft pecans? Well, we want our rootstock, or the tree that we're going to be growing on, we want it to be growing. And so we want the bark to be slipping. And so the bark slipping means, I've got a piece right here, I'll show you. When we, the bark slipping just means that we can make a cut to this wood, and it's going to pull easily from the bark. Now, if this was in the wintertime, this wood would be stuck tight to the bark. We're exposing the cambioli layer, the tissue right underneath the bark, between the bark and the wood. There's the cambioli layer, and that's between the xylem and the phloem, and that's where the callus tissue will be formed to heal the two pieces together. And so this wood has to be slipping or growing actively. So we want our rootstock tree to be actively growing, but we want our graft wood or the scion wood to be dormant. And so this was collected from a cultivar that we want to grow on this rootstock. So we're going to take a known variety. Maybe this one, I believe this one is Kanza, which is a very popular cultivar in Oklahoma. And so we collected this in January or February before these buds started to swell. And you can see it has nice primary buds exposed. This is 1-year-old wood, and this is kept in the refrigerator, maybe like in your crisper or somewhere in a Ziploc bag where it's cool and moist, but it's not overly wet and it's not frozen either. So we want to protect our wood. Now we're going to graft about in this area. We want to look for an area that doesn't have a lot of bud scars or nice slick bark. It makes it easier. So I'm going to go ahead and take my loppers, and I'm going to cut this off about right here. Just a nice flat cut right there. Now I'm going to look for a piece of graft wood that is slightly larger than that right there. So I'll take my wood and I'll find one. See, this one is a little bit bigger in diameter, so that's what we're looking for. It doesn't seem like, it seems a little large, but actually you'll see how that will actually work out better in the end. I'm going to look at one more piece. It's a little bit, has a few more buds, but I like this piece. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference in the size, the diameter of the rootstock and the piece of graft wood. So we've got our piece of graft wood selected. We've got our rootstock ready, except I need one more tool. That is a rubber band. And the rubber band is going to pretend, it's kind of going to be my third hand eventually. It's going to help me hold it in place. So I'm going to loosely wrap that around there. And so I'll be able to use that in a little bit. Now when I'm making cuts on the rootstock for my flaps, the 4-flap graft is also called a banana graft. I want to make our flaps about the length of my grafting knife blade. So I put my grafting knife up against the wood, and you see where my hand is and my thumb is pressing against the knife. I don't want my hand up here because I can slice right through that wood sometimes and I may slice my hand open. So I want to have my hand below it and press with my thumb. And it just kind of inserts in the bark, and then when you hit that wood, it stops. So that's far enough. That's right where you want to be. Now I'm going to go to the other side and do another cut exactly like that. So we're going to end up with 4 cuts. So we've got our flaps cut. They're ready to go. So you can kind of loosen them up a little bit. So I've got my flaps cut, and now I'm going to make cuts on my piece of graft wood. So I'm going to start on one side, about the same length as my blade, so the same length of my flap, and I'm going to make a cut to expose that cambiole layer. So all along here, that cambiole tissue is exposed. Now I'm going to flip it all the way over and make another cut all the way across, make another cut. So I'm making 4 flaps that are about the same size, or 4 cups that are about the same size as my flaps. And you can see that it's exposed that cambiole tissue in lots of areas. The more cambiole contact between the graft wood and the piece of, and the rootstock, the better chance of success in your graft union. So we'll go ahead and peel our flaps back. So you can see why it's called a banana graft, right? Looks like a banana. And I'll take my pruners, my hand clippers, and carefully, I want to cut this plug out without cutting off the flaps. Now I'm going to insert my graft wood. Make sure that your buds are pointed up because we don't want to do it upside down. And then we want to line up the flaps where it makes good connection with that cambiole tissue on the cuts on our graft wood. So you can see there's kind of some graft wood exposed. And so if our graft wood was the same size as our rootstock, we wouldn't have as good connection on some of these flaps. Now, in the past, we've always used tape to go around this, masking tape or budding tape, and then put foil on it and then put a baggie over it. But today I'm going to show you the American method that one of our growers, Mr. Jim Smith down at Shawnee, he started using this, and it seems to work really well. But we're going to use something that sounds all American. We're going to use duct tape. But we're going to start below our cuts, so below here, and we're going to wrap this tightly, but not so tight that we move our flaps, okay? So we want to make it firm, but not where we're moving them, because we've got it lined up where we want it. And then make sure that that's all covered up nice. And so if you kind of test it, you can see that's pretty firm. If it was flopping or loose in there, then we know it wouldn't have a very good connection, and our callus tissue may not form very well. So we've got it on there and it seems pretty tight, so that's a good sign. Now at this stage, you can either use wood glue, Elmer's glue, or shellac, amber shellac. I kind of like to use amber shellac. I've got amber shellac in here. You can find it at your home stores, department stores. It used to be called orange shellac, but now you can find it as amber shellac. And so amber shellac will stain your clothes, so you have to be careful not to get it all over you, which I usually end up with some on myself. But I'm just going to paint the entire part of this piece of graft wood that's exposed. And that's just going to kind of keep the moisture inside that piece of graft wood. We don't want it to dry out. Putting it over the buds and everything. So there's a bud right here and a bud on this side. So once they start to swell, they'll break through this amber shellac and grow just fine. Now we have one last step that we want to do before we leave this graft. We wanted to make a little perch. So if the bird lands on there, it's going to land on our perch instead of our graft. A bird has a lot of force when it takes off. And so if they're landing on our graft that we've made, they can, when they take off, they can weaken that union. So we're gonna just put a stick, you can use bamboo stakes or whatever, but just cut off a branch. And now that bird's gonna land right here instead of right here. So it can sit here, and if it flips off, when it flies, it will move this instead of moving our graft union. Now this graft, it may take a few weeks for those buds to start pushing. It just depends on the weather conditions and how well this rootstock is growing. And so whenever it starts to push the buds, we know that it's making some connection in between the rootstock and that piece of graft wood. But our graft, from this part up, from right here that's exposed up, is going to be exactly like the tree that this piece of graft wood was removed from. So it's going to be a Kanza pecan that's produced off of this type off this piece of wood. Now if we get new shoots like this bud down here, if it starts to grow, then it's going to be the rootstock. So we would want to remove that at some point. But we want to leave what's from here up to produce our pecans. When we graft, we are getting a known variety. We are also speeding up the time to production. A grafted tree is going to produce nuts much quicker, since this wood was taken from a mature tree and our rootstock is juvenile. So that tree would have to grow to full size to be sexually mature before it would actually start to fruit. But since we've taken a piece of wood from a mature tree, it's going to be able to produce fruit much quicker. So maybe on some varieties it may be like maybe 3 to 5 years before we have a really a good crop on these. So this is the American method of the 4-flap graft, or some people call it banana graft. There's videos on the Pecan webpage. There's fact sheets that have pictures step by step on how to do this procedure, and lots of good information that you can find on that Pecan webpage.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.